Hi, my name is Jennifer Garrison. This is SPD 50705001, Foundation of Inclusion for Students with Autism Spectrum Disorders. The first thing is the definition for inclusion as related to education. Basically, that all students, regardless of their abilities, background, learning styles, have full access to the general education curriculum. It's the principle that supports that you should include special ed students with their non-disabled peers as often as you possibly can, and try to educate them in that setting instead of a more restrictive environment. Participation is something that is so important when it comes to those students, because you want to make sure that they are getting as much out of the curriculum as they possibly can. Both typical students and students with disabilities typically start performing higher in different testing, and as long as there are appropriate strategies and accommodations in place for students who have special needs, then they can also achieve high standards. The supports are another thing that are important for inclusion. Some of them might be that you have a student who needs to sit at the front of the class, or you might have a student who needs to have their test read to them, or you could have a student who typically spends a lot of their day in a self-contained area who might come in with a para and they can sit with them. If you include intervention specialists in their planning with gen ed teachers, then they're able to set up the inclusive classroom a lot better than they would be individually. Some of the possible barriers to inclusion, you have a lack of accessibility. Some buildings are not built with students with special needs in mind. They might have the facilities that are required. There's also the attitude barrier, where you have some people who grew up and never really saw a person who had a learning disability or anything like that, or they would be put in a separate area in order to learn. They would not be included in the gen ed curriculum, and so they would think, that they don't belong there. Not having enough staff. We have this a lot in the school I teach, because we have not nearly enough intervention specialists, and the ones that we do have that are like long-term, or that we have hired for IEP writing, have had to become long-term subs because there are not enough ISs to fill classrooms. And that's just for special ed teachers, so that they're not going to have the resources for a lot of gen ed teachers in order to have access to the curriculum when they don't have teachers to teach these classes. Inclusion reduces the stigma around special education if these kids get to know their peers as people and not just, somebody who's loud or flaps their hands or, walks with a limp. And they get to know them, and that humanizes these people as it should be, and it allows for more social acceptance of students with special needs. By using peer methods to teach, you have kids who will come up and teach. They'll have like the Socratic method, having mentorships, having mediation with students, using students to have some of the inclusion aspect is an important thing that you have to think about with students with special needs. By learning to be more accepting of students who have special needs, when these kids go out to the the real world, it's not going to be that big of a deal when they see someone with a physical handicap, or they see someone who has an intellectual disability. They will treat them like people because they know people who also have this, and they know that they have different personalities, stuff like that, and can appreciate it. In order to access inclusion in the classroom, I think that using the universally designed model is important, because you have different types of learners, and it allows you some play in how you can teach these students. Like, it doesn't always necessarily have to be like paper pencil test. Get to know your students. You might be a little bit aggravated that you have these kids in this class, and if you have tested subjects that you're worried about things not passing. That's not usually the argument that I hear. And if you get to know these kids, then you'll realize that they need an education just as much as anybody else, and they deserve it. Using different formats, like I just said, is also a strategy. 3 of the organizations that I use to find out about inclusion or for resources, one is called the Inclusive Schools Network. It gives you tools for creating environments that foster inclusion. Teaching Tolerance teaches a anti-bias education, so that not only are you recognizing your biases, but you're actively going against these biases. And then Kids Included Together, it's a nonprofit that helps with the setup of inclusive classrooms. And I do believe that is it. Thank you.